What's up, guys, and welcome back to My Girlfriend's English. In today's video, we're going to talk about 8 heteronyms of handling conflict.
English pronunciation is difficult.
Especially heteronyms, because heteronyms look the same, but they are pronounced differently.
Usually, the difference is what part of speech it is in. So, most of these are going to be noun versus verb, but some of these, they might have an adjective form. This is not always the case. Not all homonyms or words that look the same then have different meanings are going to be pronounced differently for each different meaning. This is not always the case. However, for heteronyms, this is the case. So, these words today, these 8 words today in handling conflict are going to look the same but be pronounced differently with stress on the second syllable for the verbs. This is just a quick way for you guys to know which one you are using in context so that you can pronounce it properly, but so that you can also understand which one you're hearing when you hear it in conversation.
Yeah, and generally speaking, we try to avoid putting those 2 parts in the same sentence together because it's confusing not only for the listeners, but it's also confusing for the speaker to try to be able to say both of these in the same sentence. It's actually really hard, but we combine them together so that you guys can have a way to practice these in a very short, succinct kind of way.
Practice listening and speaking. So the first one today is subject or subject.
So subject is like a thing or even a person that's being studied. So like my favorite subject is math.
But to subject is to force someone to do something. You subject them to forced labor, for example, or you subject them to some kind of punishment.
Yeah.
Not a nice word.
No. Another meaning of subject, the noun, is the people over which a king rules. So the king has subjects, or the king's subjects loved him very much.
The subject is not cooperating with his study.
Or as a verb, the king subjected his people to the highest taxes in the nation's history.
The king subjected his subjects with the highest taxes ever.
The next one is really difficult because it has 2 pronunciations for both sides, and so it's a little bit muddled. But generally speaking, one might say converse or converse for the noun. So for example, I grew up believing the converse of that.
Or lots of people wear Converse shoes.
You could also say the converse argument of that is
right.
Meaning, and that would be an adjective.
Right, but where we are from, we say the converse of that is...
Yes.
This. So, but if I put the noun there, it's interesting that I would say the converse of that, but if I just say the converse is this. So if I'm saying the same thing, but if I have an object for converse or converse to modify, then I will say converse. If I'm going to say converse, it's different.
The noun means the opposite of something, but the verb means to talk about something.
To converse about something. And
right.
I will say we do typically still maintain converse.
Yes.
Our emphasis on the second syllable for
yeah.
this one. This is by far the most commonly used way to use it, to pronounce it as a verb. Right. However, we've also heard converse meaning conversation. So this is one of those things that's really, really interesting, and you're going to hear it both ways. But just so you know, you would be correct in either way you said it. Just know that some regions are going to prefer one way over another in certain situations. Honestly, that one's going to take an ear in context to learn. We didn't realize it till like just recently that this was actually both, and we realized, oh, we do say both. So that's all new territory for us too.
The converse argument is that there aren't enough resources to go around anyway.
He loves to converse with anyone he meets.
You should try to find people who believe in converse ideals to converse with on a regular basis.
Content versus content. So content is anything that makes up the contents of something.
Yeah.
Whether it's the contents in a box or the content on a paper or in an article or in the news, this is called content. But content refers to a state of you are satisfied. You are just full, you're a full glass, you are satisfied with your state in life and whatever's happening in the moment. Little babies who are sleeping always appear to be very content.
In the dictionary, you might find something by using content in a very simple past way by saying something like contented. Like you are very easily contented, aren't you? But in American English, that would be super weird.
That would be very weird.
So,
it's like saying learnt.
Yeah.
We don't say that. British speakers might.
So, for example, the contents of his paper were so misguided that he had to start over again.
This next one, I'm going to direct at Josh. I'm content to be single for the rest of my life. He was not content with the contents of his lecture.
The next one is refuse and refuse. So refuse is a noun meaning like trash. And refuse, the verb, means to say no to something. So
Right.
no, I don't want it, or no, that's not allowed.
But very abruptly or harshly. So he absolutely refused is something we might say if Josh was like, so did he take it or did he want that? And it's like, no, he absolutely refused, which means it implies that something was a little bit rude about the response to me.
Yeah.
But the way that I say it, like if I just said it politely, like, no, he refused, then that's a really strong word to use already. But I'm saying it politely. Josh's first question would probably be like, how bad did he refuse?
What happened?
What happened? Did he cuss you out? Did he get angry with you? But if I just say he refused, like if I'm like really enunciating that, then it's going to be a lot more harsh. And maybe I also acted ugly back to him.
We may or may not say that to our kids sometimes. He refused to do what I say.
He refused to eat his broccoli.
Yeah.
Or he refused to eat his carrot.
But refuse, on the other hand, is extremely formal. So normally Americans would never say refuse unless it's talking about maybe something that's more literary, so maybe an older book, or just a formal setting like talking about waste management, like something that the city does.
Ways to collect refuse off the streets or something, but even still, that's a long shot.
Yeah.
In terms of argument, we might also use refuse in a way to describe how disgusting something is. Like there was refuse all over the place. So a landlord might complain to his lawyer, who they're about to do like a lawsuit with the person who rented his property and just destroyed it. He might describe it as refuse. So it's a very strong word to use, kind of like rubbish. Yeah. I would say kind of.
It's like exaggerated.
Yeah, it's exaggerated, it's formal, and it's something that's just has a lot of strong meaning to it as well.
So, for example, after the riots, there was a lot of refuse all over the streets.
Yeah. Despite his insistence, the manager refused to give him a raise.
Putting them together, hoarders are people who refuse to throw away their refuse. So the next one is conflict or conflict. So these two words are very much related. One is the noun, the state of being in a disagreement with somebody, and the other one is the verb, to disagree with somebody.
Right. So these are very closely related. We still pronounce them differently with the stress on the second syllable for the verb and the stress on the first syllable for the noun.
It can also be used as an adjective, like what we would often describe as conflict resolution skills.
Ooh, yeah, that's a chunky word for you.
Yeah. It is used pretty often.
Yeah, we also might make it a present participle by adding an ing and say that conflicting information confused the listeners, right? Yeah. So then we can make it like an adjective.
So as a noun, it is very common for young couples to experience conflict.
Conflict resolution is perhaps one of the most important skills of a manager.
We couldn't meet together because our schedules conflict.
The next one is contrast and contrast. So the noun form, contrast, means you're showing the differences between something, how the two sides differ. But to contrast things is to show or illustrate how they differ. So again, this one's very closely related.
Yeah, and contrast also has a very technical meaning for like photography, where it actually shows and contrasts the white and the black a little bit more than what you normally find in a normal picture.
Or the blue light and the red light.
Yeah. So for example, as a noun, the contrast between the young couple was clear to everyone except them.
Right? Because whatever causes conflict in an argument tends to be something that is contrasting views, contrasting ideas, or attention drawn to a contrast that you guys don't appreciate in the moment. Maybe it's annoying, or maybe it makes you angry. Yeah. And so this is one reason we would use contrast or contrast in an argument setting. The prompt asks the students to compare and contrast the two main characters.
In order to compare and contrast the two books, one first has to contrast the two authors. So the next one is desert and dessert. Now keep in mind that this is not dessert, what we're talking about.
That's two S's.
These are both the same spelling and only one S. So the noun desert is a place of sand, but the verb dessert, which sounds like ice cream, means to leave somebody for good, oftentimes in a very bad way.
So obviously the source of a lot of conflict there, that second one.
Right.
Some people might describe like difficult places in their relationship as a desert because deserts are barren and don't have much water and therefore not as much life as a well-watered area.
Yeah.
Right. So these both have been used in conflict conversations a lot. Especially deserted has this meaning of like a soldier leaving and it being some kind of deserted. It has a very heavy feeling of betrayal. So this can happen with relationship. It can happen in the military. It can happen with your country. It can happen with all kinds of any organization, anything.
Yeah,
really.
Anything that you break like a big commitment for.
Big commitment break. That's the big thing.
Yeah. So for example, while brutal, the desert can also be a very beautiful place.
When the going got tough, you deserted us.
Or combining them together, instead of killing the men, the enemies deserted them in the middle of the desert.
The next one is console versus console. Now, console refers to more like a central control spot.
Yeah.
So like a game console is a source of all of your games. It holds all your data. So you plug in your controllers to that. It's the console for the whole system. However, console means you are comforting someone who is hurting, whether from loss or whether somebody deserted them or whether there was some kind of tragedy in their life. Usually we would say console for something that's either very motherly and nurturing, like a mother holding a child who's crying from being hurt. She's consoling the child. Or for something where it's just very nurturing in the sense of you really care about your friends. Or you really, really love your family members and you're trying to console them in a difficult time by being there. It very much has a very present feel. You've got to be there.
Yeah.
You can't really console someone over the phone very easily. Some people try to use that term, but I think it's more used in marketing than it is in actuality.
Yeah. For example, even though they didn't have a lot of money, they still went out and bought the newest game console.
No matter what his friends did, they couldn't console him.
Or he consoled himself by saying that he wouldn't have to deal with the truck's broken console anymore, now that it's totaled.
All right, so there you go, guys. There are 8 more heteronyms that we use in handling conflict. Situations where we're arguing or whatever, those are words that might come up. And it is really important in the heat of the moment to get your word right. Because if you start talking about, you desert me, that's not okay.
No, that wouldn't be a very good claim. It wouldn't be a very good point. When you're having this conflict, that wouldn't make much sense. In fact, it might make a person laugh at you instead of actually producing the right reaction, which should be anger or defense.
Yeah, but again, laughing might be a good way to diffuse a situation as well.
So the point with these guys is not so that you can have 16 new words that you can have just in your belt, but so that you can know that there are words out there, many words out there that are like these heteronyms that can confuse people by if you say the wrong syllable, if you use the wrong pronunciation, it can make your listener confused. So you need to make sure that you're practicing pronunciation, not just the word when you actually learn it.
Besides, if you are a high intermediate student, none of these should be new to you. You should be coming across them in your writing and your reading and your listening that you do regularly or should be doing regularly. These words should all be familiar to you, but we are drawing these out so that you can see them side by side and have sentences to practice to make sure that you get these right. Because if you're high intermediate and you want to get to advanced and beyond to fluency, you really need to get these pronunciations correct.
And keep in mind that as native speakers, we don't think about which pronunciation to use. And these are natural sayings that we do when we're saying these words. Sometimes we might get confused on words like converse and converse, but most of the time we use these naturally as we discern and use the right context when we're speaking to our friends.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.